I can't believe it's the sixth episode of my series about Let's Talk About Politics. So it's been 6 weeks now. I'm talking about this item. So today I'm going to stick to the news, and I will try to have a reflection about racism and have a bigger picture about what is happening. So first of all, I want to start with the experience of Jesus Christ, because it's my mentor, I would say, and it's my reference. So at the time Jesus was living, it was not only the culture in his nation, but it was a world culture of xenophobia and slavery. Xenophobia and slavery were the norm at that time. Xenophobia, and for instance, we can take what was happening with the Greeks. Those who weren't Greeks were considered as barbarian. It was the same with the Romans, and either you were a Roman citizen or you were nothing, and they were despising the Jews, for instance. And even within the Jews, there were some xenophobic behaviors towards even those who were very close to them, like the Samaritans, who actually were from the same origins, or versus the Gentiles, who because the Jews didn't want to mix up with the Gentiles. And slavery was very common, and in the history of Israel, you've got so many examples of slavery, and especially the time in Egypt. So it was so embedded into the culture at that time that even St. Paul wasn't condemning slavery, but was trying to explain how to ethically behave if you were a master or if you were a slave. So that was the general culture. But there was a difference that was brought by the faith. First of all, with the Old Testament, with Israel, for instance, it wasn't possible to be within the Jewish culture. It wasn't possible to be a slave for more than 7 years, because every 7 years you were freed from all your debts, and slavery was equally considered as a debt. So no slave more than 7 years. That was for slavery, and considering xenophobia, it was possible within Israel to be a proselyte. A proselyte was somebody from another nation who wanted to become a Hebrew and be integrated. So it was possible, even if this person wasn't from the same blood. This person just had to go through studies, be circumcised if it were a male. But it was possible to be integrated within the Jewish society. Difference with the New Testament, that was a thing that was brought by, no wonders, by Christ, because Christ was always acknowledging the faith of the stranger, the alien. So we've got multiple examples, like the Syrophoenician woman with the crumbs under the table, with the centurion who, according to Jesus, had the faith that wasn't equaled in the rest of Israel. We've got the example with the Good Samaritan. And also because in the ethics of Christ, what it was primary for him was to feed the poor and heal the sick, but also to liberate the captive. So he was strongly against xenophobia and against slavery. So it's not a surprise for you that in any form of phobia towards your neighbor, I'm against it. Xenophobia, racism, homophobia, misogyny, misanthropy. Well, things that are naturally not within my my mindset, but also because as it is so antagonist with my theology as a Christian. Combined to that, there's the topic of violence. So I come quite regularly about violence in my talks, but I think this is something that is quite significant in the way that is what is happening with xenophobia and slavery and things like this. So so let's take a look at what is happening today. And so we've got this all this story about George Floyd and his death. The technique of the knee on the neck is debated in between the experts of the police. But what is not to be debated, I think, is the fact that the intention of the policeman who killed George Floyd were clear. He was with bad intention, not necessarily to kill him. We don't know. That will be the task of the trial to tell us that what, but definitely there was bad intentions behind. And so the reaction to what happened invite us to have a reflection on a larger scale, to have to step backward and have a look at the broader picture. So in several ways. First of all, I want to have a reflection about the geography. So USA, what is the culture behind? In USA, you've got this culture in their history of slavery. The USA were made, the wealth of the South was made with slavery. Then you've got the Civil War, and the Civil War left the states of the South with some anger about the fact that they were defeated. And then you've got segregation and all the fights to liberate from segregation. And these themes are still very accurate, current in the American society, even if some of the people are less segregated and have a relationship in between the various origins of the people. There are still some people who are very segregated within their friends, within their families. There's also this question of the culture of violence in the U.S. society. It's terrible. There is still this question about people wearing weapons, having guns, the civilian having guns, and that's very weird for us European, but which means that everybody in the street is a potential threat for his neighbor, his or her neighbor. And also the way justice is thought in the USA. If you have a look at the figures about how many people are in jail and how many people get back to jail, you realize that justice is not thought as rehabilitation, but vengeance. The situation is quite different in Europe. It's different. It's not that it's better or worse, but it's different because there's a different narrative. First, the historical one. Whether you are in UK or in France, there's still this dream about the former colonial empire and how great our countries were when we had a colonial empire, and how we brought civilization to all these tribes who weren't with civilization, completely forgetting that by doing that we were against two of the major commandments in the Decalogue, which is do not covet the wealth of your neighbor or do not steal. So yeah, yes, there were some positive sides about the techniques that we brought and the education and medicine, but it was at the cost of lives, and because it was made with violence, and people died because we were wanting their countries. Situation in Europe is also different about the police, and in most of the European countries, the police is totally different from the USA, where the police has got some means. Um, the police is quite poor in Europe. It is quite often neglected, as well as the justice. And this is an issue because the police and justice suffered the fact that we were quite frugal. We have become quite frugal about the way budgets are made and cuts were made. So this is also an issue. If we have a look at the figures, the statistics, as a powerful tool for ideologies to fight against each other. So you've got on one side people who have a look at the statistics and realize how much opportunities in life, like jobs and housing, is very different if you are with black origins or if you with Caucasian's origin. And on the other side, there are some people who complain that the black people, or well, any stranger or with a different origin from yourself, benefit more than from the welfare state, and this is outrageous how much money we are spending on these welfare states. And same, you've got the figures that are confronting between all the police violence that is existing, and that's we cannot deny it, and versus the crime rate within certain ethnicities. So people are fighting over these figures, completely forgetting that these figures are consequences. They are not the reasons. So you have to have a look at why we have these figures. Why is the situation so that we have this kind of figures? What can we do about this? And relating to that, we've got still this culture of violence that I was talking about with the US society, but it's still in our societies here as well. But well, it's very obvious when you see that in the States, anything that is related to sex or swearing is a taboo in the US, whereas they are fascinated by blood and violence. So how can you hear when someone is swearing on the television, you hear beep, and at the same time you've got a film that is full of violence and hatred inside. There's a problem of culture. And also we've got stereotypes, and stereotypes are the consequence of the lack of education, the lack of knowing your history, and especially knowing the history of slavery and colonialism. We totally forgot that slavery was dating from the Roman Empire and before, and that everybody was enslaving everybody. Well, whether you were white or black, you could become a slave. That's in the history. And above all, there's this lack of will for reconciliation and to acknowledge one's failures. Everybody talking about the statistics are confronting to each other and about who is right, who is wrong, and not how can we solve these problems and get over them. And this brings us to extremes, and we've got this opposition, for instance, between Black Lives Matter and All Lives Matter. How can it be opposition? It's of course all lives matter, but how did they manage some people to say all life matters just to defend white lives matter against black lives matters. It's such a nonsense. It's a nonsense. And other extremes like a president who is not able to understand why we want to unchristen some barracks in the States who are called, according to CSA generals. Well, of course, that's normal. And on the other extremes, for instance, well, it's very good that we get rid of the statues from former slavers. But for instance, some people want to attack the statue of Baden-Powell. Of course, there were some bad things about Baden-Powell, but he's a founder of Scoutism, which is the most inclusive organization that has existed. So we are in extremes. So in the end, let's get back to Christ. How? Because he's the model. He's the one who is able to bring us back to peace and to equality, equity. What was he doing? He was always getting back to the scriptures, i.e. for us, history. We've got to look at history. We've got to research history. We've got to learn from history. We need the wisdom from history. Know where do we come from. The other thing he was always doing was going to the alien, meeting the alien, being with a stranger, knowing the stranger. He wanted to go to people not with stereotypes, but who, for what they were. He wanted to know what was good in these people. He wanted to know what was bad. And he was taking us as human beings entirely and was able to love us as we were. And above all, he was refusing violence. He was against violence because violence is not the answer. So brothers and sisters, I think if we want to change this world, we've got to follow his example. Amen.